The generation before you learned to endure things quietly, to push through, to keep family matters behind closed doors, to treat therapy as weakness, to carry pain that had no name and ask nothing of anyone. That was the inheritance, suffering without language. And for a long time, the expectation was simple. You would carry it the same way. You didn't. And that refusal, quiet at first, then collective, then impossible to ignore, is one of the most psychologically significant things this generation has done. Not because speaking is easy, because it wasn't supposed to happen at all. You didn't grow up in chaos. You grew up in transition. Your childhood belonged to an analog world, landline phones, waiting for your favorite show to come on at a specific hour, playing outside until the streetlights flickered on. Life moved slower. Mistakes faded. Nothing followed you forever. Then, almost without warning, adulthood arrived and the world had changed. You didn't just enter the internet. You were forced to migrate your entire existence into it. Profiles replaced introductions. Metrics replaced meaning. Visibility became currency. You are a bridge generation. The only generation that had to fully adapt from one world into another while already carrying adult responsibilities. High adaptability paired with chronic inner instability. When you're always adjusting, you rarely feel grounded. When you're always coming, you rarely feel finished. You are not broken. You are simply standing between two worlds, carrying the weight of both. And you were not raised on fear. You were raised on hope. The message was simple and repeated. Work hard, do the right things, and life will take care of you. Go to school, get a degree, be responsible, be patient. Success was a fair exchange, effort in, stability out. You believed that promise and organized your life around it. Then, just as you stepped into adulthood, the ground gave way. September 11th shattered the illusion of safety. The 2008 financial crisis arrived as you were forming your professional identity. Jobs disappeared. Careers stalled before they began. Student loan balances grew faster than paychecks. Housing slipped out of reach. The rules stopped working and no one officially told you they had changed. This is where silence first became unsustainable. When a system fails but continues to insist it's fair, the damage doesn't stay external, it turns inward. You didn't think the system was broken. You thought something must be wrong with you. Psychologists call this economic gaslighting, being asked to doubt your own reality while carrying the consequences of a collapse you didn't cause. You worked harder for less security. You delayed milestones not because you were irresponsible, but because the math no longer added up. The cultural narrative shifted the blame onto you anyway. Lazy. Entitled. Unrealistic. You did everything right and learned to feel ashamed anyway. That unresolved tension became the background noise of your life, a low-level anxiety that never fully shuts off. This wasn't a personal failure. It was a collective betrayal, and you were the first generation to eventually say that out loud. The anxiety that follows isn't tied to a single fear. It's tied to uncertainty without an off switch. When stability disappears, the nervous system adapts by staying alert, not because something is wrong with you, but because nothing ever feels fully safe. You wake up already bracing for the email, the bill, the subtle sense that one mistake could unravel everything. Cortisol never quite drops. Rest doesn't feel restorative, it feels risky. Tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, sleep that never feels deep enough. These aren't personal weaknesses. They are the physical imprint of long-term uncertainty. From the outside, you look fine. Inside, you're constantly calculating how much margin you have, how close you are to the edge. Your anxiety is not a character flaw. It is the cost of living too long without security until you stopped carrying it alone. If any part of this feels like your story, take a moment to drop a like. It helps more people find conversations like this one. And, if you want more psychology that goes this deep, subscribing is the best way to stay. To understand why this generation refused silence, you have to look quietly, without blame, at the homes many of you grew up in. A large number of millennials were shaped by instability long before adulthood. Divorce became common. Many parents were overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or unknowingly anxious themselves. Love was present, but often inconsistent, conditional, or distracted. Some grew up with pressure, every grade mattered, failure felt catastrophic. Others grew up with absence, leaving you to grow up faster than you should have. Different environments, same result, uncertainty about emotional safety. Anxious attachment formed quietly, always scanning for abandonment, needing reassurance but never fully trusting it. Others learned avoidant attachment, valuing independence, pulling away when closeness felt overwhelming. The common thread was emotional hunger. You learned early that love had conditions, that approval had to be earned, that being easy was safer than being needy. But something shifted in this generation. You were the first to ask, is this normal? The first to name what happened as trauma rather than just life. The first to question inherited patterns instead of blindly repeating them. That question was not a trend, it was a survival response. Because the silence your parents kept had a cost you could feel in your own body. And speaking was the first thing that didn't make it worse. Millennials became the first generation to grow into adulthood with an audience. You didn't just live your 20s, you documented them. Profiles replaced first impressions. Likes, views, and titles quietly became measures of worth. Now your reference group was infinite old classmates announcing promotions, strangers launching startups, curated lives unfolding in real time. You started comparing your private confusion to everyone else's public certainty. Imposter syndrome thrives in this environment. No matter what you achieve, it feels provisional, like you're one misstep away from being exposed. FOMO became existential, not fear of missing a party, but fear that life itself is happening somewhere else without you. So you performed stability. You curated resilience. You posted proof that you were okay. When you're always being seen, it becomes harder to know who you are when no one is watching. Reflection gets replaced by reaction. Authenticity by optimization. When your identity becomes a brand, you slowly lose access to who you are when nothing is being optimized. Self-presentation replaces self-connection. This isn't a moral failure. It's what happens when survival teaches you that being seen matters more than being whole. The generation that refused to stay silent also had to confront what speaking costs. You normalized therapy. You learned the language your parents never had. Why does this hurt? Where did this pattern come from? Does it have to stay this way? That awareness gave context to pain that once felt personal and shameful. It created permission to seek help instead of silently enduring. But awareness has a shadow. Understanding your wounds doesn't automatically heal them. For many millennials, insight became a form of protection, analyzing instead of feeling, explaining instead of resting. Self-reflection turned into self-surveillance. Healing became another project to manage and optimize. The language of recovery was absorbed by the same productivity logic that caused the exhaustion in the first place. Rest became something to optimize, not something to receive. Awareness without integration can leave you stuck in understanding without relief. Still, and this matters, this generation deserves recognition for something profound. You broke the silence. You challenged the idea that suffering is normal and that help is weakness. When you choose awareness over denial, boundaries over endurance, honesty over appearance, you reduce the weight for those who come after you. The task now isn't more insight. It's learning how to let safety, slowness, and embodiment catch up with everything you already know. Healing isn't about knowing more. It's about feeling less alone inside what you already understand. You are not failing. You are carrying weight that was never meant to be carried alone. You were handed a broken map and told to find your way anyway. You absorbed economic collapse, cultural acceleration, emotional neglect, and digital overload, often all at once. That exhaustion isn't a weakness, it's the cost of adaptation. You are not the lost generation. You are the generation that looked at inherited pain and said, "This stops with me." You questioned parenting styles, work cultures, relationship dynamics, and the emotional silence passed down for decades. And you weren't supposed to. The silence was the rule. But you broke it anyway. And that is what this generation will be remembered for, not for being the loudest, but for being the first to understand that some things cannot heal until they are named. So take a moment to recognize the strength in your survival, the courage in your curiosity, and the power in your voice. You are seen, you are remembered, and your story matters.